Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
While the reporter's photos depicted a woman standing at the helicopter door, Jack knew Lucian was behind it. He thought the matter had ended when the celebrity scandals dominated the public consciousness that afternoon. Thus, the next day, he planned to meet up with Roxan by using the project as an excuse. To his surprise, her assistant told him she wasn't in the research institute. In fact, he received the same answer over the next few days. By then, no matter how stupid Jack was, he could still realize what was happening. He knew Roxan had left with Lucian, so he wondered how long it would take them to return. To his surprise, it was a whole week, and that enraged him. Jack was still upset as he spoke. Even though the development of our project was about to begin, the person in charge of the research institute was nowhere to be found. "What do you think I should say about that, Ms. Jarvis?" When he brought up the project, Roxan felt guilty and apologized further. "I'm really sorry. Due to a personal issue, I had to lie low for a while and inadvertently delayed the project. You've every right to be angry, Mr. Damaris. I promise that I won't disappear again after the project starts. You'll be able to find me whenever you want." Her answer satisfied him. Knowing where she went with Lucian or what she did during the past week doesn't matter. What matters is that I can win her over as long as she remains within my reach. When his train of thought ended there, Jack complained with a softened tone. Don't you think you should make up for all my wasted trips here, Ms. Jarvis? An apology isn't enough." Upon detecting the change in his tone, Roxan sighed in relief in her mind and grinned. Of course. Tell me when you're free, and I'll treat you to a meal." Sure, but I'll decide the location of our meal as well. You'll be spending quite a bit of money, Ms. Jarvis. As long as I can lighten your mood, I'm willing to spend as much money as necessary. We'll also use the opportunity to speak about the project's progress. The research development was delayed because of your absence, after all. I'm sorry. Forget about it. There's nothing we can do to regain lost time. I'll be pleased as long as our collaboration is successful. I still believe in your research institute's capabilities. After exchanging a few more words, they ended the call. Roxan turned to Linda and blurted, "You're right. Mr. Damaris was a little angry at me. Were any other projects in the research institute delayed?" Shaking her head, Linda answered, "Everything was fine." Then she stared at Roxan carefully. "Dr. Jarvis, about the news regarding Mr. Damaris from a few days ago, Roxan had already guessed what Linda was going to say and explained, "I don't believe what you see on the internet. Damaris Group is an important partner of ours. Just treat him as you used to." Upon receiving a clear answer, Linda nodded. After a while, Jack texted Roxan the location and time of their meal. She read the text, spared a few more words to Linda, and left the research institute. The location Jack picked for his meal date with Roxan was a cafe with a quaint flair. In fact, it had a vibe similar to the Damaris residence. When she arrived, Jack was already waiting for her inside. Upon noticing her, he stood and gestured at her. She quickened her pace and sat opposite from him. Having learned their lesson from the last time, they sat at a table in the corner this time. A sandalwood incense was burning nearby them. Roxan felt strangely comfortable when she took in the scent of the incense, possibly because she was used to the smell of traditional medicine. Hence, she didn't give it too much thought because she assumed it was the cafe's specialty. "I'm sorry for being late again," she apologized Roxan with embarrassment after taking her seat. "We're meeting up this time because I wanted to make up for the fact that my disappearance last week caused a delay in the project's progress. Yet, I'm late again. I feel so rude." Jack smiled nonchalantly and poured her a cup of coffee. It's fine. This cafe is quite far from the research institute, and I just happen to be near this area." As he spoke, he casually fiddled with the incense burner. Seeing that he didn't seem to mind her tardiness, Roxan let out a sigh of relief. I should be the one apologizing to you, Jack abruptly said. That puzzled her. Why is he apologizing to me? In the end, I was the reason the public focused on you. Gazing at her apologetically, he continued, if I hadn't changed the time to nighttime, those reporters wouldn't have taken those pictures and said those things on the internet. When he brought that up, Roxan felt conflicted. I suppose he is right. As though Jack had read her mind, he explained sincerely, I really did have something I needed to attend to during noon that day. One of Damaris Group's companies that sells medicinal herbs had a bit of a problem that required my assistance. Of course, she had no intention of blaming him. She merely thought what happened that night was too coincidental. Thus, she replied, I know you didn't change the time without reason. Neither of us would have expected reporters to be following us. Besides, the incident's over. Out of nowhere, Jack sighed a little. So, you've gotten back together with Mr. Farwell. That dumbfounded Roxan for a few seconds. What am I supposed to say to that? My relationship with Lucian can't be easily explained. The look in his eyes darkened when she didn't immediately respond. However, when her line of sight landed on his countenance again, he acted normal and questioned icily. I'm assuming you spent your time away with him? Instead of denying it, Roxan answered, we needed to lie low because the media had their sights on us. Jack was displeased that she didn't reveal where she went or what she did with Lucian. However, he didn't want to keep himself in a bad mood, so he changed the topic. In the period you were away, I did some research related to the development of the new medicine. I feel like perhaps we can change the trajectory of the project. The market's been lacking in anti-cancer medicine, especially ones centered on traditional medicine. In response, Roxan pondered the issue with a grim expression. I noticed that previously. However, it'll be difficult to pull off because the public prefers to rely on Western medicine to combat cancer. He proceeded to brief her about the result of his research and concluded, perhaps we can be the first to achieve that feat. Roxan was moved by his words but remained hesitant. Perhaps, but I lack enough knowledge of cancer to support the research on an anti-cancer medicine. Over the past few years, she had been more focused on researching how to treat patients through acupuncture. She simply didn't know enough about medicinal herbs to be confident in developing an anti-cancer medicine. Sensing her worries, Jack said, I won't lie. Only a few medical books kept in the Damaris residence touch on this research. However, the reason the research in those books was halted was due to technical issues at the time. It was also these books that inspired me. Roxan's eyes glinted upon hearing that. If I can take a look at those books, perhaps I'll get some inspiration, too. Then again, those books are properties of the Damaris family. I don't know if he's willing to lend them to an outsider. The books about traditional medicine I lent you in the past were a part of that collection. If you're interested, I can lend you the whole set. Without hesitation, she nodded. However, she thought about something and inquired, is it really okay for me to read them? Don't those books contain content the Damaris family wants to keep confidential? Medical prestigious families tended to have a few techniques they wouldn't share with anyone. It was why Roxan was overjoyed when Jack taught her Route 13 and why she was skeptical about his proposal to lend her those books. He grinned. I can't hide anything from you, can I? Indeed, there's a condition you need to fulfill if you want to read those books. What condition? She frowned. I have a bad feeling about this. As you said, those books contain secrets the Damaris family doesn't want anyone else to learn. If you want to, you'll have to sever your relationship with Dr. Lambert as his apprentice and join the Damaris family. As though he was afraid she wouldn't agree, he added, the content of these books isn't something an ordinary apprentice can access. Old Mr. Damaris has to acknowledge their capabilities first before they can read those books. Only 3 members of this generation in the Damaris family have earned the right to read them. If you join us, you'll be the 4th. Someone else in Roxanne's position probably would have accepted Jack's condition without hesitation after listening to his tempting offer. After all, she had learned almost everything from her teacher. Even if she severed her relationship with Harvey at that moment, she wouldn't be negatively affected. Yet, she rejected, in that case, I'm afraid I'll have to say no. The look in Jack's eyes darkened. Why? Don't you want to read those books? Aren't you curious about the Damaris family's medical skills? If I remember correctly, she joined the medical consultation because she wanted to take a glance at the Damaris family's collection. Roxan nodded. Of course I do. However, a few books aren't enough to make me betray Professor Lambert, who has helped me multiple times in the past. He's more than a teacher to me. An imperceptibly cold look flashed past his eyes. If she had accepted my proposal and become a member of the Damaris family that way, I could have settled for that as the next best thing. However, I didn't expect her to reject it. Since you're putting it that way, I'll seem despicable if I try to persuade you further. Suppressing his rage, Jack pursed his lips nonchalantly. I hope you won't regret your decision, Miss Jarvis. Is it just me, or does Jack's attitude seem different from his usual? Stifling the strange feeling in her chest, Roxan grinned at Jack. I won't regret it. If you wish for us to research anti-cancer medicine, I'll still do my best. He lifted his coffee cup at her. In that case, let us toast to our collaboration's success with coffee instead of wine. Without delay, she clinked her cup with his. After the two of them briefly discussed the research progress, they determined the project's starting date. They also talked about when Damaris Group would provide how much medicinal herbs to the research institute. When their meeting concluded, it was already evening. Standing up to leave, Roxan glanced at her phone and saw it was time for classes in the kindergarten to be dismissed. Then Linda called her, asking her if she should pick up the children. Roxan said no because the children had been complaining about her occupation with her work and voicing their desire for her to pick them up. Based on the result of my discussion with Jack, I'll be getting busy again in the next few days. I think I should spend my free time with the children when I still have some. As she thought, she drove to the kindergarten. Upon arriving at her destination, she saw two teachers leading the children out of the kindergarten in a line. Then she noticed an unfamiliar teacher standing next to Pippa. She looks gentle. Miss Jarvis, this is our kindergarten's new teacher, Miss Smith. She's taking care of Archie's class with me, Pippa introduced. In response, Roxan smiled politely. Nice to meet you, Miss Smith. I'll be counting on you to look after my children. Silently, Ophelia scrutinized Roxan. Before returning to the country, I often listened to Aubrey complaining about Roxan on the phone and describing how Roxan snatched Farwell Group's CEO from her. It's why I've been curious about what kind of person Roxan is. Now that I've seen her for myself, based on her face alone, I think she does have the potential to be a vixen. When her train of thought ended, she greeted Roxan politely. Soon, the entrance was clogged with the parents of other children. Roxan bade the two teachers goodbye and brought the children into her car. Do you like the new teacher? She asked caringly on the ride home. The children exchanged glances with odd expressions. What's the matter? You don't like her? Benny answered, No, we just thought she was a bit weird because she kept staring at us. Even during group activities, that new teacher constantly tried to approach us, but she was hindered by the other children. In response, Roxan glanced at the children through the rearview mirror apologetically. I'm sorry. It's probably because of what happened a few days ago and the fact Miss Smith is a new teacher that she's curious about you all. When I returned to the Research Institute after Lucian announced the children's background to the world, plenty of employees there stared at me with slightly different looks, too. I suppose the new teacher is just like them, curious about us. She comforted, If you all don't like it, I'll tell Ms. Ward tomorrow to remind Miss Smith not to stare. The children nodded. Roxan's life was soon back on the right track while Lucian's was still in chaos. Lucian considered going to Roxan's place in the evening after handling all the accumulated work in Farwell Group. However, he received a phone call from his mother, who asked him to return home as soon as possible. Lucian furrowed his brows at his mother's annoyed tone. Nevertheless, he still drove back to the manor. As soon as he stepped into the house, he was greeted by the sight of Sonia sitting on the couch. Why are you here?" he questioned with a frown. Sonia turned to look at him and said unhappily, If I hadn't come here, I wouldn't even know you were back." He had not mentioned to anyone about him going overseas with Roxan. Sonia had come over every day to ask her son for an explanation, but always ended up empty-handed. When she called him and mentioned Roxan and the kids, he would always give a half-hearted response before hanging up. Hence, Sonia had nowhere to vent her anger. Since they were finally back, she naturally had to have a talk with her son. Lucian knew she didn't have good intentions, and his expression darkened. He walked over to the couch but didn't sit down, making it clear that he had no intention of engaging in a lengthy conversation with her. Sonia's expression turned dark when she realized this. What do you mean by this? Roxan hasn't married into the family yet, but you're already on her side." Lucian was used to Sonia's animosity toward Roxan and said calmly, I'm on her side because of your hostility toward her. If you can stop being like this, I would love for you and her to get along well." Enraged, Sonia slammed the table. Unbelievable. Do you believe you're right? What's the deal with the two kids? Do you even know who you are? How dare you accept the two illegitimate children and even fabricate their backgrounds? Lucian looked at his mother without saying anything in response. As she spoke, she gradually sounded angrier. Do you know how many relatives called me recently? They even prepared monetary gifts for those two children. What do you want me to say to them? Those relatives were so eager to get in their good books that they even suggested having a welcoming party for the two children. When Sonia heard the suggestion, she almost fainted from anger. How dare they suggest having a welcoming party for those two children? Not only has Lucian gone insane, but are these relatives going senile too? Nevertheless, Lucian had already made a public statement. Sonia couldn't publicly chastise her son, so she could only give half-hearted responses to her relatives' questions. Lucian was unfazed and stated matter-of-factly, I already asked for Roxan's hand in marriage. She accepted it, so it's only a matter of time before Archie and Benny become my children. They aren't illegitimate children. When those relatives ask you, you can tell them they are the sons of the Farwell family. Sonia was hit by another wave of dizziness. It was more shocking to hear this from her son's lips than reading it on the internet. He's adamant about accepting the two illegitimate children into the family. After a long moment, she finally regained her senses. She massaged her forehead and said, I don't accept this. There are so many people eyeing Farwell Group's assets. Even those relatives can't wait to get their hands on some of it. However, you're giving them to two children from unknown backgrounds so easily. This is unacceptable to me. Sonia had never entertained the thought of her being in the wrong. She had always thought she was looking out for the Farwell family and that it was Lucian who was becoming more and more unreasonable. With that, she glanced at her son expectantly. She only wished for him to understand her intentions. However, there was no change in Lucian's expression. A Farwell Group's success is largely attributable to me. I'll manage how I split my assets on my own. If Archie and Benny had the capability, he didn't mind passing Farwell Group on to them. Sonia was rendered speechless upon hearing this. Lucian glanced at her. Besides, they are still young. It's too early for you to worry about this. Sonia wanted to say something, but Lucian interjected. On the contrary, take a look at your age. You should stop meddling in such insignificant matters. I am capable of managing my own affairs. Why don't you go out with my father and travel if you have so much time? It will be beneficial to your health. With that, he headed upstairs without giving Sonia a chance to speak. Looking at her son's retreating figure, Sonia huffed in anger. "Oh, what do you mean by that? Stop right there." As if he hadn't heard her, Lucian vanished after making a turn on the stairs. Old Mrs. Farwell, calm down." Catalina tried to pacify Sonia's anger by giving her a cup of coffee. Seeing this, Sonia became even more agitated. "Even you are making a joke out of me. Do you want that Jarvis woman to come back as well?" Catalina sighed quietly to herself. "Mrs. Farwell is... who told you to refer to her like that? She will never marry into the family as long as I'm alive." Sonia uttered pettily. Catalina remained silent. She knew Roxan would soon be part of the Farwell family again, and Sonia's opinion of her would undoubtedly change eventually. Sonia was in no mood to talk to her anymore. After sitting on the couch for a while, she took her bag and left the house in a fury. Elias returned to the Farwell main residence at the same time Sonia did. Seeing her furious demeanor, he approached her with a puzzled look and asked, "What happened? Why are you so angry?" His question jogged her memory of what Lucian had said to her. Her mood instantly soured, and she retorted, "Why are you asking me? You should go and ask Lucian." Elias sat beside her. What did Lucian do? He had never gotten involved in Lucian's relationship matters because he was confident his son could handle them well. However, he was aware that his wife was constantly concerned about it. Now that the marriage engagement with the Pearson family had been cancelled, he felt Lucian's marriage was the latter's personal matter, so he didn't understand what Sonia was mad about. Sonia glared at him. Didn't you see Farwell Group's statement? Lucian must be insane. Shouldn't you do something about it as his father?" Elias was dumbfounded upon getting scolded by his wife. Naturally, he had seen the public statement, but he knew the two children would need to have legitimate identities when Roxan and Lucian got together. Compared to letting the children enter the family with unknown backgrounds, Lucian's method would spare the family a lot of trouble in the future. Of course, this was on the pretext that Roxan was going to marry into the Farwell family. Sonia's expression turned darker when Elias didn't reply to her. "Do you also think that he has done nothing wrong?" Elias frowned, and when he spoke, his voice was tinged with a hint of exasperation. "I've long since told you to let Lucian make the decisions himself when it comes to his marriage. Everyone is free to live their own lives. Why must we meddle so much?" Disapproval was written all over Sonia's face. How could I possibly allow that? Is Lucian's marriage his business alone? Never mind if he wants to marry some other woman, but why must it be that woman? Why must it be Roxan? Worse still, she comes with 2 little children. Seeing that she was still dissatisfied with Roxan, Elias patiently cajoled. No matter who he wants to be with, that's his business. He matured into an adult ages ago. We can't interfere in everything. But still, Sonia remained obstinate and griped. If he had finalized his marriage with Aubrey earlier, all this wouldn't have happened. After saying that, she shot the man beside her a chagrined look. "You're no better. It's because you allowed him free rein in everything that he delayed the marriage until now. Reality has proven that Aubrey is indeed unsuited to be the mistress of the Farwell family." On the contrary, Elias felt that Lucian hadn't done anything wrong. Aubrey only did something wrong out of her anxiety to get engaged with Lucian. If he had settled down with her earlier, she wouldn't have done all those foolish things, Sonia riposted. Upon hearing that, Elias stared at her in vexation, his gaze probing. Feeling a tad guilty from the way he was scrutinizing her, Sonia muttered, "I'm not saying she was right in doing all that. I merely feel that she's sincere in her feelings toward Lucian." As she finished saying that, the wretched state of the Pearson family at present flashed across her mind. Melancholic, she heaved a sigh. "Ultimately, the Pearson family has been friends with us for many years, but they've now been reduced to a miserable existence by the Farwell family. It makes it appear as though we're too ruthless." Elias was likewise aware of the Pearson family's current condition. However, he didn't find any problem with his son's actions. Since Aubrey dared to make a move against a member of the Farwell family, she naturally had to be taught a lesson. As for the Queen family seizing advantage of the situation to pounce and take a bite out of the Pearson family, that was just the usual competition in business. There was no right or wrong. Elias, can you talk to Lucian about letting the Pearson family off the hook? They've already been punished enough. He won't listen to a single word I say, so you're the only one who can persuade him, Sonia ranted, grasping Elias' arm. Lifting his hand, Elias placed it over hers in consolation. To put it bluntly, the Pearson family's current condition is a result of business competition. We can't be of any help. Furthermore, if word gets out that the Pearson family had walked all over us, yet we still helped them, is the Farwell family not going to be easy prey whom everyone can attack in the eyes of others? His voice was gentle, but it left no room for negotiation. With the Farwell family's reputation coming into play, Sonia had no choice but to nix her plan. Nonetheless, she was still loath about allowing Roxan to marry into the Farwell family. Sighing softly, she remarked in what appeared to be an unintentional manner, "Speaking of the Pearson family, I wonder how Essie is doing right now." Elias also missed Estella then, so he replied, "Go and visit her if you're worried. It so happens that I haven't seen her in a while either. We'll go and visit her together another day." Shifting her gaze to him, Sonia lamented in feigned helplessness, how I wish. But Lucian has sent her over to Roxanne's place. I wanted to go and visit her, but Roxanne didn't allow her to approach me. It was as though I'd hurt her. Puzzlement inundated Elias. Why? You're Essie's grandmother. Why would Roxanne forbid you from visiting Essie? Is there some misunderstanding between you both? At that, Sonia sighed bitterly. What misunderstanding could there be? She never liked me when she left 6 years ago. That aside, I'd always wanted Lucian to be with Aubrey and objected to her being with him. Thus, she holds a grudge against me. While saying that, she hung her head and nestled into the man's embrace as though she had suffered untold grievances. Subsequently, she added, she's already treating me in such a manner now when she hasn't gotten back together with Lucian. What should I do if she were to really marry into the Farwell family in the future? Am I going to be prohibited from visiting my own son and granddaughter? Elias knew absolutely nothing about the issue between the two women. After hearing his wife's complaints, his first reaction was to mediate a peaceful resolution. There must be some misunderstanding between the two of you. Everything will be fine after talking things out. At the end of the day, he didn't believe that his son would take an interest in a petty woman. When Sonia noticed that the man showed no signs of siding with her, panic swamped her. She even eked out some tears. It's all on me. I shouldn't have poked my nose into her relationship with Lucian. But it wasn't me who forced her to leave 6 years ago. After she left, I even searched for her for a long time. And now, she wants to come back. What does she take the Farwell family for? Tightening his grip on her, Elias stated solemnly, I'll ask Lucian about it. Only when Sonia heard that did she feel somewhat gratified. Right then and there, Elias took out his phone and gave Lucian a call. Meanwhile, Lucian was working in the study. As soon as he saw that his father was calling, he could surmise that his mother must have said something to the man upon her return. However, he knew that Elias rarely interfered in his relationships. Without giving it further thought, he answered the call. Is something the matter, Dad? Elias' baritone voice rang out from the other end of the phone. Where's Essie right now? At her mother's place. Lucian answered honestly. Then, he asked, what about it? Your mother claims that Roxanne didn't allow Essie to approach her. What's that about? Does she have some misunderstanding toward your mother? Verily, that was the only possibility Elias could think of. Lucian had known that his mother would undoubtedly complain to his father after returning home, but he had never expected her to make such a bogus claim. His head throbbing, he put aside the work at hand and explained patiently, It's true that Essie isn't close to her these days, but I can promise you that it isn't because of Roxan." Hearing that, Elias lowered his eyes and studied the woman in his arms. "Are you saying that it's your mother's fault?" At a loss for words, Lucian went silent for a few seconds in contemplation before elaborating. Precisely speaking, there's some misunderstanding between her and Essie. For some reason, Essie has a slight aversion to her. It has nothing to do with Roxan." Elias' eyes brimmed with confusion. "Essie has an aversion to Sonia? We watched Essie grow up, and I've seen how much Sonia doted on her. All this while, their relationship had been pretty great. Why has that changed recently?" Seemingly having guessed his father's thoughts, Lucian added, "If you're worried, you can go and see for yourself. I'll tell Roxan about it. You can go over anytime." It so happened that Elias wanted to go and have a look personally. Hence, he agreed without any hesitation when he obtained that reply. "It's decided, then. I'll go and pick Essie up from kindergarten tomorrow evening." Lucian didn't expect his father to be in such a hurry to go and pick Estella up. After hanging up the phone, he glanced at the time. Seeing that it was still relatively early, he wanted to phone Roxan to inform her about the situation. But on second thought, he snagged his jacket and went downstairs. Downstairs, Catalina had just prepared dinner. When she saw her employer coming down, she hollered, "The food is ready, Mr. Farwell." Lucian halted in his steps for a fleeting second. "Go on and eat. I'm not having dinner at home." Having said that, he left in huge strides without waiting for a response from her. Catalina stared at the man's back, bewildered for a moment. In the next heartbeat, understanding dawned upon her. Aha! Who else could induce such an expression on Mr. Farwell's face? He must be on his way out to visit Miss Jarvis once more. Thus, he's also likely having dinner there. Roxan had just finished cooking dinner and led the 3 children to the dining table. They had all taken their seats when the doorbell outside rang. Putting the fork in her hand down, she got up for a look. The instant she saw the person on the screen, she was momentarily stunned before she spun on her heel and went to open the door. Lucian was waiting at the door, tenderness showing in his eyes at the sight of her. After the few days they spent at Miralia, the man's demeanor toward her had grown increasingly gentle. Despite being used to seeing him with such an expression, Roxan still felt a sense of dissonance. After all, he had only ever been cold to the outside world. Why are you here? Didn't we agree on you staying away for 2 days?" Corralling her thoughts, she regarded Lucian before her in mystification. On the way back from Miralia, Madeline suggested that they avoid meeting each other for the next 2 days on the off chance that someone might spot them together. That was also Roxan's plan, but she didn't expect Lucian to pay her a sudden visit. The man at the door quirked a brow, his tone teasing. Shouldn't you allow me in first if you want to avoid being seen with me? If I continue standing here, and the media gets a snapshot of me." A flash of panic flitted across Roxan's eyes, and she hastily turned sideways to allow him in. Thereafter, she carefully peeked out. It wasn't until after she had darted her eyes around and found nothing amiss that she closed the door. At the sight of her all tense and wary, Lucian assured in a deep voice, "Don't worry. I had the bodyguards do a sweep of the area." Only then did Roxan truly rest easy. The project was getting back on track these few days, so she really didn't want a repeat of her experience a few days ago. Lucian's arrival appeared to thrill Archie, Benny, and Estella greatly. They didn't even bother eating anymore, but crowded over to him intimately. Deep within her, Roxan still found it pretty unbelievable. She had always thought the man's character would be off-putting to Archie and Benny. Unexpectedly, he was extraordinarily patient with them. In fact, the boys almost liked him as much as they did her. As astonishment flooded her, she also couldn't help feeling relieved. Since they like him so much, I don't have to worry that they won't be able to accept the reality when they learn about their identities in the future. Roxan took a set of tableware for Lucian. "You haven't had dinner, right? Let's eat together." After her interactions with him the past few days, her attitude toward him had also done a 180. She was no longer as awkward before him. Nodding, Lucian sat down across from her. "Is something the matter that you came over at this hour?" Roxan asked once more. Lucian glanced at the children around them before murmuring, we'll talk about that later. Let's eat first." Clocking his expression, Roxan bobbed her head in understanding. She didn't press him for an answer anymore. The family of 5 was finally together again. That made the 3 children so happy that they were all smiles even as they ate. After dinner, they knew their parents had something to discuss, so they tactfully went to the back garden to play. Roxan took the tableware into the kitchen. Initially, she thought that Lucian had something important to say and planned to take him to the study to talk. To her surprise, Lucian was standing at the kitchen door with his head lowered as he rolled his sleeves up when she whirled around. Before she could wrap her mind around it, the man had already strolled over casually. Picking up the bowl she had washed, he wiped it dry. Seeing that, Roxan was again startled. That action of his gave her the illusion that they were a couple who had been married for a long time. Moreover, the picture of the high and mighty CEO of Farwell Group entering the kitchen gave others the impression that he had stepped down from his pedestal. Sheer shock deluged her. Conversely, Lucian nonchalantly started speaking of the purpose of his visit. "My father wants to go to the kindergarten to take Essie home tomorrow." As his words drifted into her ears, Roxan abruptly snapped back to reality. "Have you agreed?" She remembered him saying back then that his consent was required if his parents wanted to take Estella away. Yeah. He seems to have misunderstood the relationship between you and my mother. For that reason, I think he should have a look for himself, Lucian replied. Although his father didn't spell things out, he knew the man suspected that Estella was only hostile toward his mother because of Roxan's instigation. Since Elias had such a concern, he didn't mind allowing his father to see where exactly Estella's aversion to Sonia came from. Roxan nodded in acknowledgement. "I got it. Essie might be reluctant to leave me for the time being. Anyway, I'll talk to her." At that, Lucian cast her a grateful look. Thank you." Lowering her gaze, Roxan chuckled airily. They were the ones who raised Essie in the first place. It's normal for the elderly to miss their grandchildren. However, Essie is pretty stubborn. I'll do my best to coax her. Despite saying that, she was actually worried inwardly. For some reason, Estella was exceedingly averse to Sonia. Hence, she was afraid that the latter would upset the little girl. Seemingly seeing right through her, Lucian softened his voice and promised, I'll get my mother to see reason slowly. I'm sorry you have to put up with her." When Roxan heard that, she stilled imperceptibly. A glimmer of elation flashed across her eyes. "I thought he would, at the very least, maintain a neutral stance between me and Sonia. I honestly didn't expect him to side with me. It turns out that I'm not the only one working hard when it comes to his mother's attitude toward our relationship." Although his father didn't spell things out, he knew the man suspected that Estella was only hostile toward his mother because of Roxan's instigation. For a moment, she didn't quite know how to describe her feelings. Some time passed before she gradually composed herself. Lifting her eyes to him, she whispered, "Thank you." Lucian stared at her intently. "I should be the one thanking you for your willingness to persist until now despite my mother's attitude toward you." After he had said that, his gaze darkened a shade. Guilt stained his eyes. If she realizes her mistakes in the future, I think." Before he had finished speaking, Roxan had already chortled aloud. "As long as Mrs. Farwell can divest herself of her prejudice toward the boys and me, I'll be more than glad to be a family with her." She sounded incredibly sincere, her voice devoid of any pretense. Locking gazes with her earnest eyes, Lucian couldn't help leaning toward her bit by bit. Meanwhile, Roxan was inexorably taken aback when she sensed his approach. By the time she gathered her wits about her, the man had already captured her lips. His hands spanned her waist, leaving her with no way of escaping. Fortunately, Lucian merely kissed her briefly. Shortly after, he dropped his hold on her.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.